This is the moment, this is 30th of March is the entry, and it's the moment when I've just finished all the looking up. 30th of March. Hallelujah. This feels like progress. I've looked up most of the things I needed to look up, and I've made a few small choices. There are still a lot missing, and many, many edits ahead. But at least the manuscript now actually looks like the draft of a novel, and no longer like an explosion in a multilingual nonsense factory. So, well, that's something. A few of the things I have been reminded of in the last few days. 1. If I'm honest, sometimes when choosing between a couple of options for a word, one of the criteria that plays a part is simply which word I like the most. Today I had one of those rare cases where I was struggling because basically I really like both alternatives. So is the narrator's approach going to be furtive or stealthy? This language spoils me sometimes. I also like the word baleful enough that I found myself trying quite hard to crowbar it into a sentence where it probably doesn't belong. Great though, isn't it? 2. Bread is for a seemingly simple noun surprisingly hard to translate. 3. English does great verbs. I just took a phrase which in Spanish was something like I pulled up with great and abrupt strength and translated it as I yanked. Other words continue frustratingly to non-exist, however. I need an adjective to describe someone who is waiting for something, but which isn't waiting, which doesn't give any indication as to whether they think the thing they await will be good, expectant, or bad, apprehensive. If you have any suggestions, I'll be here sitting waitingly. 4. Prepositions are really annoying. 5. We usually rely on context to tell us which of 2 or more possible meanings is the most likely. So while I learned this week, for example, that the word palo not only means stick, of course, but is also used specifically in Chile to refer to, the writer was Chilean, I should say, to refer to $1,000,000 nonetheless, going on probability, the scene in which a character is badly beaten with a palo almost certainly intends the first meaning. She is not, I'm fairly confident, being viciously assaulted with large wads of banknotes. But a few new things I have learned. 1. That point I just made about being able to deduce meanings from context doesn't always work if you have a writer who actively enjoys using words in unlikely ways. This is and will continue to be a problem. There are even 2 instances of words in this book which, if it were any other writer, I'd think they were typos for other similar but much more obvious words. But here, maddeningly, I can't be sure. More on this to come, I suspect. 2. Alero is the Spanish for eaves. Another lovely new word to forget before the week is up. 3. Car accidents seem to be dealt with differently in Chile in legal terms. It has something to do with judges, and I haven't grasped this entirely yet, still pending further investigation. 4. The Brazilian translation of this book, which I mentioned a few days ago, includes 2 translators' footnotes. One of them to explain what a fletista is, as per my February 1st entry, and one to gloss the wordplay between wrist and doll, my entry on March the 14th. I have unreasonably strong feelings about using footnotes, but wonder whether this is a book in which I should maybe just get over myself. I used a couple of them in my very first book translation about 1,000 years ago, and have managed to avoid them since, but I could, I suppose, make an exception. There is a footnote here. I am slightly compromised, though. I once casually remarked to an author that I consider the footnote in the translated novel to be an admission of defeat. That author then quoted me saying exactly this in one of his books, and that book in question appears in English this summer. Never say things to authors. And 5, I've learned that there are several more or less singable English translations of the Internationale, and I don't really love any of them. Tomorrow, I start reading. Having put all the various slippery bits back into the novel and sewn it up again, now is the stage at which I find out if the patient still has a pulse. I'll let you know.